Okay, everybody, welcome to the next Strange Realities online event for June 29th. And tonight we've got Seriah Azkath from Where Did the Road Go? He's going to be talking about exploring morphic reality. And I just wanted to take a little bit of time here, guys, just to thank everybody for coming out to this. And also to tell you guys about a little bit of like what we're doing and why we're doing this. And Serfiel, if you want to help me out with this too, kind of like what our idea is and kind of like our vision for doing these type of these little events. So if you'd like to talk about it, or I can talk about it, whichever one that you want to do.
Yeah, just again, thanks everyone for coming out. So the Strange Realities Conference, of course, started 3 years ago. And we also were having online events as a part of our Patreon subscription model for our podcast, me and Adam do, called Conspirinormal.
Right.
And eventually we merged the two ideas. So instead of just having these hangouts as part of the Patreon tier system, we started branding them as Strange Reality streaming events. So it's like little nuggets from what you would see at a Strange Realities conference. We learned a whole lot from the 2020 conference that was all online. So we got pretty good at hosting streaming events. And so we're doing these every month with a different speaker, having presentations, and just having a little more of a formal exposition of people's research than just like a podcast interview. So it's really a great way for people to share their ideas. And tonight, of course, we've got a great friend of the show, Seriah Azkath, and he's going to be giving his presentation on exploring morphic reality.
Right. And we normally do these, I think, on like we do these on the third Friday of every month, but tonight we're doing a special Wednesday because we're kind of running up against the July 4th holiday as well. But we hope you guys enjoy this and enjoy what we have to offer. Next, at the end of this, we'll let you guys know who's coming on next time. But Seriah, if you want to go ahead and take it away, would be happy to let you get started.
All right. I do have to say the title was the best I could do for what I'm trying to talk about. Also, I definitely need to get you a more updated picture because the one you used is from before 2014. So
is it really? Is that okay?
And you're wearing a mask.
No,
yes.
The one there on the one on the picture you had for tonight.
Oh, for tonight.
From the Mitchell Street WVBR studio, and we moved out of that in 2014.
Uh-huh.
Picture, it's an old picture.
Go down to the local mall and get us your updated glamour shot, and we'll be happy to use it.
Yes, please do that, Seriah. Just to let you guys know before Seriah gets started, go ahead and mute your mics, and Seriah is going to lay some knowledge on y'all, and you'll see us on the flip side.
All right, so the thing with me in presentations is that I don't, I'm not very structural. And a lot of this stuff is coming together from little tangents I've gone on during Where'd the Road Go? And so what I have is just basically we're gonna start with what reality is. And the problem is we don't know what reality is. It's definitely strange. There you go. But reality is it's vibrations, and our brains make sense of those vibrations. And I think most people know that, it's just vibrating atoms. It's a lot of empty space. It doesn't look that way. Our brain translates everything into the images we see. But the thing is, those images are very easily changed. I suspect that our deeper levels of consciousness shift that structure, especially when you're the only one experiencing it. But I look down toward the scientific fields of psychology and stuff like that to understand better how our brain works. So, like for instance, one of the interesting things, and I'm sure most people know this, what you're seeing is actually upside down and your brain flips it over. So as it goes into the back of your eye, into the retina, the image is actually reversed and your brain then flips it over. I was actually listening to an old episode of The Last Exit for the Lost where we talked about an experiment where they took glasses that flipped everything upside down and they made these people wear them for a while. And I don't remember the time period, but it wasn't very long before the brain corrected. And they were then seeing things right side up again. And when they took the glasses off, everything was upside down. And it took a while for their brain to recorrect. But this is the thing. We don't know what our brain is doing in between. It's doing a lot of very automatic things. And I have talked about this a lot, again, usually in little tangents, and I will eventually do a whole show on it. It's a book called The Invisible Gorilla. And this thing, it's a book on psychology, but it's a book that is absolutely relevant to the stuff we deal with in the paranormal. And it started with an experiment called The Invisible Gorilla. And you can find this if you Google it. It's a experiment where they had a bunch of basketball players, some dressed in black jerseys, some in white jerseys, and they were passing a basketball back and forth. And they would tell the person to sit down and count how many times like the basketball players in black or white passed the ball to each other. And so the people would focus on that. And while this was happening, they had a guy in a gorilla suit walk through the middle of the scene, do a little dance, and walk off. 50% of the people watching the video didn't see the gorilla. And this launched them down this whole thing of experimenting on how our brain actually perceives things. And they call that, now that my tablet turned off on me when I needed it, they call it inattentional blindness. And what it is that when your brain is focused on something, it tends to block out all the stuff going on around it. There were people that got angry with them about the gorilla thing, saying that they're showing them a different video when they said, look, you didn't see this gorilla, because they were refused to believe that they could have missed such a thing. But it's because they had their brain focused on one thing. So they call it the illusion of attention. We experience far less of our visual world than we think we do. Our brain filters a lot of stuff out that it doesn't think is important. If we were going to be bombarded by every sensory input we had, our brain wouldn't be able to process it all. Our consciousness would not be able to process it all. We'd be completely overwhelmed. So a couple of these are quotes from the book. Our brains are built to detect patterns automatically. And the pattern we experience when driving, for example, features a preponderance of cars and a dearth of motorcycles. In other words, they're talking about how motorcyclists, sometimes people will look and not see a motorcycle coming. And it's not because they're not looking. They better said here, looking is not the same as seeing. You could look right at a gorilla or right at a motorcycle without seeing it. So looking is necessary for seeing. If you don't look, you can't possibly see, but it is not looking that is sufficient for seeing. Looking at something doesn't guarantee that you will notice it. And this is the attentional point. They did a study of pedestrian accidents and found that cities with a lot of pedestrians had less pedestrian accidents than cities with lesser pedestrians, because people were more aware of the pedestrians. So when they looked, they were actually seeing them. I think there's a pretty easy example here of how this fits into the paranormal, because a lot of times we're focused on one thing and it's like we have blinders on, and that is how our brain works. So for some people, they're never going to see this stuff because their brains are focused very much on a very, very specific view of things. And when they encounter something that's outside that view that they're not looking for, they just don't see it. You know, again, you're looking, but you're not seeing. And I'm sure many people have had the experience of reading a book, getting 3 or 4 paragraphs in and realizing I'm not actually processing any of this. I'm looking at the words, but I'm not reading. I'm looking and reading, but I'm not seeing those words. They're not propagating in our brains. So yeah, this is some of the stuff they experimented with. They also found that when something is distinct, they used a they called it the red gorilla experiment. And they said it shows when something is unexpected, uh, unexpected distinctiveness does not at all guarantee that we will notice it. So that was the other thing they found, is even if something really, really stands out, that blindness we have can still function and block it out, because the brain just says, this isn't important. When you're counting how many times a basketball's passed, that dancing gorilla, that's not important at all. And so many people just don't notice that what the brain picks up, what the brain decides it's going to use, is completely based on familiarity, what it thinks it needs to survive, things of that nature. As they put it, expectations are based on our prior experiences of the world, and perception builds on that experience. So the more, if you've experienced something a number of times, you're more likely to see it as it is later. So when we're dealing with rare phenomena, paranormal phenomena, our brains, I think, have a very hard time figuring out what that is. And I've suggested before that sometimes, especially these one-off monster sightings, these really weird ones, might be something that our brain has just not encountered. And it might scare us because it's not encountered it. It may not be that the thing itself is scary, but our brain is scared because is this a threat? Well, if it's a threat, it must be a monster. And so it projects that image onto the thing we're seeing, and you get these crazy, wild-looking monsters that have one encounter. You know, I mean, an ape in the woods is one thing, but when you get some of these one-offs, they're really, really weird. And it just doesn't make sense that would be a real creature. What would make sense is that our brain is translating that. It's taking it and it's putting an image there, the most familiar image it can. And since it's scary and it's moving around on its own, well, monster might work. Or you might see a bear, you know, and be like, oh, God, it's a bear, get out of here, without realizing you just encountered something weird. There's no way for us to really know. And I think the more we have that experience, the more weird stuff we experience, the more our brain stops filtering it out. And that might be part of why, at least a piece of why, people have repeated experiences. So that is, I really want to have these two guys. This book was written by Christopher Chabris and Daniel Simmons. And I really want to have them on Where Did the Road Go? But being actual psychologists, I'm not sure they would come on a show dealing with the paranormal. But it is very important to the stuff we're talking about, that this book. There was part of the Olympic project. It was one of the things they did. This has nothing to do with the invisible gorilla, but they set up a trail, and they would have people going out looking for Bigfoot. Now, the Bigfoot were actually cutouts, and they were hidden along the trail. And even when they were fairly obvious, a lot of people didn't see them, even though they were going out and looking for Bigfoot. And that fits in exactly with what they're saying, because our brain just goes, well, I don't know what that is, I'm just going to filter that out. We have no control over that filter. I mean, maybe in deeper meditations, you can kind of tweak it here and there, but for the most part, we don't have control over that filter. Our brain is going to show you what it thinks is important. And that's not necessarily what you are most interested in. You're guiding it, you're guiding it by saying, look at those basketball passes, but you're not, you don't have complete control there. You're not saying, look at those basketball passes. Oh, by the way, also mentioned that there was a gorilla in the scene. So the next thing they kind of get into is memory. And memory, especially when we're dealing with this stuff, we're dealing first with perception of paranormal things, which is hard enough. But memory is not like recording something on a videotape or a digital device. It does not work like that. And the best way they explained it is memory depends both on what actually happened and how we made sense of what happened. And there are also emotional components to that as well. So you may say, oh, that person, looked at me and gave me a dirty look, but they really didn't. But someone else may have given you afterwards, or you just misinterpreted that body language. They may not even have been looking at you. There's there's a lot of ways that our memory then, because now you're remembering, oh, this person didn't like me, or you may get the vibe that this person doesn't like you, and so when they look at you in a completely neutral way, you're attaching negativity to that because you're thinking, oh, they don't like me, and now they're looking at me. So your brain kind of adds that interpretation onto memory. So when we're dealing again with weird things, you know, how much of it really happened and how much of it is our brain trying to attach different types of importance or different levels of things to it. Okay, so this is a paragraph on how we form memory. When we perceive something, we extract the meaning from what we see, hear, or smell. Rather than encode everything in perfect detail, it would be an uncharacteristic waste of energy and other resources to have a brain design that takes in every possible stimuli with equal fidelity when there is little for an organism to gain from such a strategy. Likewise, memory doesn't store everything we perceive, but instead takes what we have seen or heard and associates it with what we already know. These associations help us discern what is important and to recall details about what we've seen. They provide retrieval clues that make our memories more fluent. In most cases, such cues are helpful precisely because they lead to an inflated sense of the precision of memory. We cannot easily distinguish between what we recall verbatim and what we construct based on associations and knowledge. And that is incredibly important when dealing with memory. Later on, they talk about the fact that even sharp memories, things that really distinctly stand out to you, are formed exactly the same way. So just because they stand out more does not mean that you're actually remembering them more accurately. So what they go into now, and Chris Ernst, I know, is listening, is probably familiar with this. It is where they change things in movies. And oftentimes, this is something that filmmakers are aware of. They can swap things out, little details in a scene, little positionings and things like that. Most people will not notice. Most people think they'll notice, but when they're tested on it, they will pick up, even if they're tested and said things don't match up in these scenes, watch this movie, or, you know, the short video clip. They've made intentional video clips where someone will watch it and stuff will shift between each camera cut. And so people will pick up some of it, but most people don't pick up any of it. It just seems smooth and flawless because our brain expects things not to change. Its experience of reality is these things don't change. So when it's watching it, it just keeps going with it. It's just like, nope, that's fine. Obviously, there are some people who are really good at picking out every little thing that's wrong. And I think when you're a filmmaker, you're also trying to, you know, you're not trying to make things not flow. So like when I look at something, because I've put stuff together like that, I always want it to flow as much as possible. I might notice it when I'm watching a movie, but I'm not noticing all the time. Nobody is. It's just how our brains work. It's not because we're not paying attention. It's because our brain does not, it just doesn't keep this information as important. It's like that. It doesn't matter. It's all the same. She didn't change her hairstyle. It's fine. They did an experiment where they went on a college campus and had someone ask directions. While the person was asking directions, someone with like a large door or large piece of furniture moved between the person giving the directions and the person asking for directions. And the result was most people did not notice when they switched the person out who was asking for directions. They just continued giving them directions. Their brain just assumed this is the same person, because why wouldn't it be? The only time they noticed is if they changed drastically, like change skin color, gender, something like that. So if they were talking to a big burly guy and they were replaced by a small woman, that they tended to notice. But if you took, you know, if you had a guy asking and then they switched with the same basic race, even similar race, you know, skin color, etc., they didn't notice. They had no idea that they were talking to somebody different because they didn't know them. So they didn't necessarily concentrate on all those details, and they didn't expect that to switch. So since they didn't expect it to switch, their brain just assumed I'm talking to the same person, and there was nothing there that was, like I said, unless you went from really large person to really small person or something like that, then your brain is kind of like, wait a second, something's not right here. So that again is important to how we're all not experiencing the same reality. And that's kind of why I said reality is kind of morphic, because I do think we can change it in the sense of like the way Seth talks about it and stuff. We can change it through forms of magic, which is basically the same thing. But it's also different. Every single experience, no one experiences reality the same way because of these things, because we attach interpretations to it, because we attach, we take past events and connect them to what's currently happening and build from that. This is also, I think, why people with trauma, they have that, they've experienced trauma. So when something new happens that even vaguely resembles what happened in the past, their brain immediately puts that danger sign up, like this is bad, because this happened before and it led to something really bad. There's also a connection between trauma and people who can see or are more prone to having paranormal experiences. So that's a whole other show. So they continue, when we retrieve a memory, we can falsely believe that we are fetching a recording of something that happened to us rather than something that happened to us. I wrote this down wrong. Our memories do not contain precise amounts of what we see. You know what? I'm going to have to go to the book because clearly it did not copy over right. All right, let's see here. Page 62. Here we go. Although we believe that our memories contain precise amounts of what we see and hear, in reality, these records can be remarkably scanty. What we retrieve often is filled in based on gist, inference, and other influences. It is more like an improvised riff on a familiar melody than a digital recording of an original performance. We mistakenly believe that our memories are accurate and precise, and we cannot readily separate those aspects of our memory that accurately reflect what happened from those that were induced later. So yes, it's memory, and we're dealing with events in the paranormal that are often spontaneous. You don't have any way of recording them. You're just experiencing them, and then our memories fill in the rest. So trying to dig through what we're actually experiencing versus what we think happened. So if you're, when we talk about the wilderness poltergeist, for example, when I presented that idea, the biggest argument is, but the poltergeist it sounds like an ape in the woods. Well, yes, because you're expecting an ape in the woods. A poltergeist is a projection from your unconscious, or at least the energy is, and it's emulating what you're expecting it to do. So, okay, so I mentioned they talk about stronger memories. They call it flashbulb memory, and it's connected to emotion. So strong emotional events will create stronger memories. They feel more real, they feel more vivid, they feel more accurate. In the book, they had a video of a lab on September 11th. And so here, this book was written, I think, in 2009. So many years later, they're talking to these people that were in this lab, and they asked them to recount what happened. And everyone they talked to had very clear, as they call it, flashbulb memories, like someone took a photograph of what happened, and they were absolutely certain about what happened. And then they looked at the video, and nobody was right. They all had bits of the truth in there, but absolutely no one remembered it exactly how it happened. Some of them were really wrong, and some of them were more right than others, but nobody was 100% accurate. And they just happened to have, this was a good experiment because they had the video and because this was such a strong memory for people. It's one of those things where people, remember seeing video of the first plane hitting the tower when that didn't happen. That didn't exist. The news popped up, of course, after the first plane had hit the tower. But that's also mistaken memory. So when we get into also things like the Mandela effect, whereas it's entirely possible things are shifting because reality can be morphic, and the future, I totally believe, can affect the past as well. Oftentimes our memory is way more deceptive than we think it is. No matter how clear of a memory we think we have, we can never be 100% sure of it. When you have paranormal experiences, especially this it amps up on this fringe stuff. It amps up with the paranormal. And I think that's why it's really important to try and stay calm, observe it as best you can, and write it down immediately before your brain starts interpreting it. One of the events I had where we saw the tree shaking up at the Potter's Field overlooking the cliff, and the whole tree was shifting and shaking, and my two friends were there, and one of them saw it shaking, the other one didn't. For years I said it had to be my friend Dave who saw it, because my friend Dave was with me all the time when weird stuff happened. And so in my memory, that's how I had it. My brain corrected the memory because it was Dave who didn't see it, and my other friend who never saw anything was the one who saw it. So in my memory of it, my brain just kind of switched them because that made more sense. And luckily I had written it down, and I went through the notes and I went, Dave was the one that didn't see it? That's so bizarre. So memory is not super reliable. And when you get into things like hypnosis, which obviously we've gone into this on Where Did the Road Go many times, hypnosis is not an accurate memory retrieval process. If you don't remember something, hypnosis is not necessarily going to dig deep into your subconscious and bring that out. It can. It has happened where people, and I can't remember who posted in Radio Stereo, so it might have been Stephanie Quick, where someone was hypnotized to get information about a bus, and then they found the bus buried. Like the guy kidnapped a school bus and buried it, and the hypnotism actually allowed this guy to remember enough details that they were able to find it, which can happen. But I also wonder if that works like remote viewing does. Remote viewers are very accurate as long as they're given feedback. And again, now we're dealing with potential retrocausality. Other people who have experimented with hypnosis have found that, like Jenny Randalls is a great example. She had an experience earlier in her life where she didn't remember most of what happened. She only remembered a little of it, but it was something that was recorded. So she was hypnotized to remember those events. They were completely wrong compared to what happened. But the parts she remembered consciously, she could talk about under hypnosis, and it was accurate. So the brain will fill in. The brain is not a data recorder. It is sort of an experience machine. It is something that is filtering reality for us, and it's how we interact with reality. It's not a data recorder. The vividness of our recollections is directly tied to how they affect us emotionally, which is why they went with 9/11 for that, and just happened to have the video, which was great, because they could make a direct comparison to what actually happened. It says, beware of memories accompanied by strong emotions and vivid details, because they are just as likely to be wrong as mundane memories, but you're far less likely to realize it. And that's the thing. If your memory is very short, and this is also the danger with hypnosis. Whatever hypnosis is, being an altered state, it creates very strong memory. So if you recall something that didn't actually happen to you, you will believe it in a much more vivid way than a normal memory. For whatever hypnosis does, it affects us in a way that it creates these memories that are much stronger and feel much more real than normal memories. So when you have UFO researchers who are, especially the ones who are pushing a UFO agenda or something, and they're hypnotizing people, and they're giving, kind of leading them into, oh, you had this horrible experience. When they wake up, they're now mildly traumatized by this horrible experience that they had that they may not have actually ever had. So that's one of the reasons I really push to not use hypnosis for anything like that. It's not a memory recovery tool, and it's dangerous. It can mess people up. This one's very interesting. They get into this idea of the illusion of confidence. And okay, so confidence is the illusion of competence. We mistake that easily, especially when coming from authorities. So if somebody sounds very confident in what they're saying, you're naturally more liable to believe them. And this can be one of the experiments they did is they had these people go to two different doctors. One of the doctors was super confident. He knew exactly what was wrong, told them what they needed to do, sent them away. And then they went to the second doctor, who was very thoughtful about it and said, not sure, let me look into this. And he pulled out some books and he looked some stuff up. And he said, I think this is what's going on. And I think this is what you need to do. The second doctor was actually right. The first doctor was not. But when asked, the people said, well, we'll take the advice of the first doctor. Why? Because he was confident. He was an authority. He was confident. He put that stuff out there. And that's what you want to hear. You want that confidence, and that illusion of confidence short circuits are critical thinking in many cases. People who have narcissistic personality disorder, for example, often come across as very confident. And that is why people kind of flock to them. You know, cult leaders, same thing. They're very confident. And I made a note here that it's kind of like what you're getting with things like the TTSA. And a lot of these people like that, like Stephen Greer, who come out and they absolutely know what all this stuff is, and they're going to give you the answers. And when you're looking at the TTSA, these guys are, these are important guys, and they're confident that they're going to figure this stuff out, and they're going to expose this whole UFO thing, and people want that. They're going to follow that, and it's part of our psychology and how we work. So again, it's how you get conned is that illusion of, again, confidence, man, so confidence increases as we gain skill, and overconfidence decreases. One of the things they look at is that the less skilled you are at something, the more confident you are that you are skilled at that thing. And the more you learn, the more accurate your confidence becomes, and the less overconfident you are. And there was a good example in the book, and I'm not remembering what it is. Let's see if I can find it here real quick. But the idea of confidence works against us, as ourselves. Let me see if I can make that more. So, for instance, it says doctors who express doubt are probably more self-aware than those who don't, but people really notice that as a sign of actual competence in an expert. Instead, we focus on personality and appearances. A number of studies show that patients are more likely to trust and confide in doctors who are dressed formally and wear a white lab coat than those who dress more casually. Yet the worst doctor is just as able to put on a lab coat as the best doctor. So what doctors wear should have no bearing on our estimation of their abilities. The self-help literature focuses extensively on the importance of appearing confident. Rightly so. You will persuade more people, and consequently, you will have more success, at least in the short term, if you present your ideas confidently. If your goal is to convince patients to accept your diagnoses without questioning, by all means, wear a lab coat. Faking confidence can be beneficial, although those who can convincingly feign confidence are unlikely to be fairly confident people to begin with. Unfortunately, if everybody takes the advice of self-help books and fakes it till they make it, the already limited signaling value of confidence will be further eroded, which will make the illusion of confidence even more dangerous. In the extreme, we will be relying on something that has no predictive validity rather than something that at present, at least occasionally, does improve our judgments. Increasing your own confidence may help you, but at the cost of hurting all of us. Yeah, there's so much in our world and so much in this damn book that it's our world is so not what we think it is. Not only don't we know what life and death are, not only don't we know what this reality actually is, but our brain is changing things and shifting things and making judgments based on things that are not what we think they are. It's not remembering things correctly. It's interpreting those memories. It's interpreting what we see. It's blocking out stuff that doesn't fit. And all of this applies to the fields of the paranormal, because it's the fringes of what, I mean, that's what's happening in our normal everyday reality. So when we get to ghosts and UFOs and other high strangeness, what's our brain even doing with that stuff? And we certainly don't know. So yeah, so it says false confidence can be higher with people who know little about the subject but have a confident personality. And okay, so this one I put in here. I also don't have enough light in here. I wasn't planning on doing this in this room, but my internet connection was not cooperating. So this is called the illusion of knowledge. And let's see if I can find this here. So what they did is they asked people to make drawings. That's right. So like a bicycle or a car speedometer or a zipper, a piano key, a toilet, a cylinder lock, a helicopter, all this different stuff. And they said, well, we want you to just make a sketch. It doesn't have to be a great sketch, but just make a sketch showing how these things work. And they found that most people were pretty confident, like on a scale of 1 to 7, they were giving it around a 5, that they knew how these things worked. When they actually were then asked detailed questions about, well, what does this do? What does this do? What does this do? They were like, oh, I don't know, and realized, no, they actually have no idea how that works. Now, some of us do, obviously. If you work on bicycles all the time, you're certainly going to know how to make a bicycle. But if you don't normally interact with bicycles, you may not know these little intricacies of how gears work and stuff like that. I remember back in, it's an interesting example. I was friends with Joel Gertner, still friends with Joel Gertner. He was a Extreme Championship Wrestling character. He wasn't a wrestler. He was sort of a manager, but before that, he was an announcer, and I was there for his first announcing gig. And as much as all of us watched wrestling, he was just doing the announcing, and he leans back to me and he goes, "Do I announce the winner from the inside or the outside of the ring?" And we all just went dead. We're like, I have no idea. Because as much as we watch it, these aren't details that our brain kept. And so he's like, I think it's outside. I'm just going to stay outside. And he was right. It turned out to be outside. But little things like that, we just, we feel confident. Oh, yeah. But then when you ask the details, you realize how little knowledge you have. And I feel like when people first get into things, it doesn't matter what it is, but you definitely see it in the paranormal. They watch a few ghost hunter shows, or they watch a few reality shows, or a couple of documentaries. And they're like, wow, I know all this stuff. Because it's like, if you can kind of draw a circle with the information you have, you start to have this illusion that you have the knowledge of everything inside that circle. It's like having a plot of land, and you buy the plot of land, and you walk the outskirts of it, and say it's like a square mile. You walk the outskirts of it and you're like, I'm pretty confident I understand this land now. And then one day you walk through the land and you're going, oh, I didn't know all this stuff was in here. Well, now I know the lay of the land. And then, you walk through it a different way and go, oh, it's completely different over here. And it just keeps going, because now you also have time. What was this land before? What's buried under the ground? So there's different levels of knowledge. And the more you learn about that land, the more you realize, I didn't know anything about this. I thought I had a good grasp on it. And I see that so much with people who are just vaguely into the paranormal. Like, like I said, they watch reality shows or documentaries, and they're like, no, this is how it is. And it's like, right, because you don't really know all the data. You just have that little sliver, and that sliver was given to you by people who were very, very confident in what they were saying. And that kind of throws things off. Yeah, so I mean, the illusion. Okay, so the next thing is the illusion of cause. And this applies to both conspiracies, paranormal stuff. And it's one of those things, I got to read this one from the book, because he gives a number of examples that are very good. And there's a lot more in this book. I'm not even done with this damn book. Let's see. Where are the examples here? Helps if I can find the examples. Yeah, they are. Okay. So the first one says drop. So these are actual headlines that they picked out of, offline. Drop that BlackBerry. Multitasking may be harmful. And they say, could researchers randomly assign some people to lead a multitasking BlackBerry addicted life and others to just focus on one thing at a time all day long? Probably not. The study actually uses a questionnaire to find people who already tended to watch TV, text message, and use their computers simultaneously. Then they compared them with people who tended to do just one of those things at a time. They then gave a set of cognitive tests to both groups and found out that multitaskers did worse on some of the tests. The original article describes the study's interpretation. It's also possible that people who do badly at cognitive tests also think that they can multitask just fine and therefore tend to do it more than they should. The next example was bullying harms kids' mental health, which I think is a fairly easy assumption. But it says, could a researcher randomly assign some kids to be bullied and others to not be bullied? And it says, no, not ethically anyway. So the study must have had a measured association between being bullied and suffering mental health problems. The causal relationship could well be reversed. Children who have mental health issues might be more likely to be bullied. Or some other factor, perhaps in the family background, could cause them both to be bullied and to have mental health issues. Does your neighborhood cause schizophrenia? This study showed that rates of schizophrenia were greater in some neighborhoods than others. Could the researchers have randomly assigned people to live in different neighborhoods? In our experience, people generally like to participate in psychological experiments, but requiring them to pack up and move might be a little bit too much. So these are just, sexual lyrics prompts teens to have sex. Were some teens randomly assigned to listen to sexually explicit lyrics and others to listen to more innocuous lyrics and then observe to see how much sex they had? Perhaps an adventurous experimenter could do this in the lab, but that's not what these researchers did. And it's doubtful that exposing teens to music of Eminem and Prince in a lab would cause measurable change in their sexual behavior, even if such an experiment were conducted. And you see this a lot with explanations for the paranormal. You see this a lot for, it's the old saying that causation is not, right words. The similarity of something is not the cause of it. So just because two things are similar does not mean that they're cause and effect. And again, in conspiracy culture, you get this a lot. You get people connecting dots and saying, well, this person knows that person, so they must be conspiring. And then that person knows this person. It's the whole board of red lines connecting everywhere. But without more data, you're just guessing and you're making connections that aren't necessarily there. And again, you get the same thing with the paranormal. The people who are convinced that there's no other explanation for UFOs other than extraterrestrial, well, they're missing a lot of data. They're just not connecting these things properly. These are not things. The problem is these are not things you can study in the lab. You cannot study UFOs in the lab because we don't even know what they are. The only thing you can successfully study to any degree is stuff like psi. So telekinesis, psychic abilities, things like that. Those are the only ones that you can come up with any kind of verifiable lab results. And we do. Other things our brain does, and one of those experiments was the experiment with Dr. Bem down here in Cornell, where he showed various students images and had them hooked up to an EKG to measure their brain waves and saw specific spikes during images of sex and violence. Those are the two things that had very distinct spikes. But what he realized is that those images were happening before the computer even chose them. Like a split second before the computer chose the image, they already had a reaction. So there was another, I can't remember the name of the experiment, just going off the top of my head here, but there was an experiment showing that our brain actually makes a decision before we're consciously aware of it. And that makes me think of the end, I think it was the last season of Westworld, where the AI, she is saying, you know, I have free will. I am not just my programming. And the guy turns the screen around, and as she's talking, the words are popping up right before she's saying them, showing her that, yes, this is your programming. Does that mean we're programmed? I don't know. Does it mean we have free will? I have no idea. It's really, I mean, it's interesting. It's kind of mind-boggling. And again, it says to us, our reality is not what we think it is. It is ever changing. We are constantly reinterpreting it. Even two twins are going to have different experiences of reality and are not going to see things exactly the same way. So the more diverse our cultures are, the more diverse our experiences are, the bigger the gap between our realities, even though we're kind of sharing the same thing. And I think this is something that needs to be put out there in a more broad sense, that we're not necessarily going to agree with one another because our experiences are different and we can't understand the experiences of another directly. So when it's arguments over who's right or wrong on this stuff, I mean, it's very morphic. Reality is very interpreted differently by different people. So that takes us to the last part of this, which brings in this guy, Keel and the Eighth Tower. And the more and more I look at Keel's stuff, the more and more I feel like he really had some home runs on this stuff. Even if it's not 100%, it's there. So he's looking at the idea of a super spectrum, that there are these levels of perception that we can't pick up on. The stuff is right here with us. Even though he called it ultra terrestrial, he wasn't necessarily meaning that it was coming from another dimension so much as it was coming from another level of reality that we can't directly perceive, and it was moving into ours. I think his belief was it moved in from the infrared and went out toward the ultraviolet, if I remember right. And that is possibly what's happening. We talked about Where Did the Road Go? The fact that cameras can't take clear pictures of infrared objects. So if you flood something with infrared light, they use it for military applications. One of the things I found was that in Taiwan, to avoid face recognition during protests, they were wearing hats with infrared along the brim. So if we're dealing with something that's coming in from that light spectrum and you're trying to take a picture of it, oh, well, that's weird, I'm going to take a picture, you're not going to get much because the infrared can actually break cameras. And we do see cameras malfunctioning when people go to take pictures of some of this stuff. I suspect that they're using some kind of energy, maybe various types of energy, depending on where you are, to actually materialize. But what you're seeing when that happens is also going to be affected by what how your brain translates it, So we're not only dealing with something unknown, but we're also dealing with our brain's own inability to understand what we're looking at. And I think that's why you see this stuff change over cultures and over time. What was angels and demons before is now spacecraft, because our brain has to put something on it, and it's going to take something cultural and put it there. One of the things that Keel says, he suggests that psychic ability to see UFOs is stronger where magnetic fields are stronger. And I think that lends itself to the idea of portal areas and stuff like that. So it's affecting our brains as well, and that is affecting the way we see reality and what we're able to perceive of that reality. If this stuff is using stuff like psi energy from us, that psi energy may be enhanced in certain areas, because it's also in the Brimstone Deceit, Joshua Cutchin talks about smells being, I think it's brimstone basically is the most common smell, which is sulfur. Sulfur is the smell of decay. So these things often smell like they are decaying. They often don't seem to exist very long in our reality. You don't have people tracking Bigfoot for days or anything. The footprints, well, as the book says, the footprints just end. And I think that's because these things are temporary manifestations and they're immediately decaying as soon as they enter our reality. Now, what they are, that's still way out there. But yeah, that one in particular, I found very interesting. He also suggests that vibrations at the same wavelength as our brain waves may create an altered state or cause us to fall unconscious. And again, I mean, reading Keel's stuff, I mean, there's a lot of stuff in there, but there's some real on the nose sort of stuff, especially in the Eighth Tower, which was originally supposed to be part of the Mothman prophecies. That was all supposed to be one big book. Came out the same year, released separately because I guess the publishers decided they wanted a more concise story with the Mothman prophecies and put the theoretical stuff in the Eighth Tower. But whereas all of his theories may not be right, there's enough in there that I think he's probably the closest to getting this stuff right, even though he kind of had the demonologist sort of look at it. But again, this is the thing. Our brains translate it as what we know. That's why I say I think a lot of these UFO abduction encounters are the same thing that people experience in native cultures as shamanic experiences, which were not necessarily positive experiences, but they were experiences these people would then grow into to learn about themselves and how to interact with the spirits and such. But when it's taken out of context, it becomes a horrible, traumatic experience where you were kidnapped by aliens and experimented on. And much of that, because of the hypnosis stuff, has been built up into our culture as well, and that affects how we see the whole. So it's almost like we're looking through a thick fog and our brain's making shapes out of it. And it's very hard to see all the way through it and get a real idea of what's actually there. And I think, like I said, the most important part is to understand how little our brain really tells us about the reality around us that's normal. And then it just expands out from that point where we're getting into the fringe and into the weird stuff. And it's so less of a common experience that our brains just do weird stuff. And that may be part of where the high strangeness comes from, because our brains are just losing it. They don't know what to do. It's dangerous. Get away from it. Yeah. So I guess that's mostly it. I haven't been able to see any of the comments or questions because it's all the way across the room from me. But if anyone wants to ask questions, now would be the time.
All right, everyone give Seriah a round of applause.
If anybody has any questions, please don't hesitate to ask Seriah. And Seriah, I think what you're looking for in the conspiracy stuff is correlation does not equal causation.
Thank you.
I think that's what you're looking for.
Yes, that is what I was looking for. My brain was failing to find those things.
It's all right. It happens.
It happens, especially when you need it.
We got a small group, so just you guys feel free to ask questions. We can also read them off.
I saw some comments popping up, but I wasn't able to read them from the room.
So there are some some comments, but feel free to come on and ask your question. So Stephanie Quick says, very interesting talk, Seriah.
Thank you.
I just have one little comment.
Yeah.
Okay, no problem.
Like a lot of these, I think it's definitely something to realize in scientific research, is that when you're looking at non-peer-reviewed research, you got to be a bit wary.
Oh yeah,
I understand. In the paranormal research, it's not necessarily scientific, but I think the same thing applies. You got to be skeptical, and you got to be a little bit wary of things that are not peer reviewed, although there's not as many peers in paranormal research.
Right. The and the problem is it's aside from, like I said, aside from psi, it's hard to really scientifically study this stuff because you don't know when a UFO or a ghost or a Bigfoot is going to appear. Because if we did, we'd be able to solve this.
Right. Yeah.
You know, psi stuff like Dr. Bem's experiments were peer reviewed and replicated,
Right.
which has seriously upset some skeptics, like to an extreme point.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, when you have scientists considering, you know, oh, we have to junk all of our stuff now because Dr. Bem's, you know, research worked under our rules. Maybe our rules are wrong. We have to redo everything, you know, instead of just accepting that, no, you're just excluding something that's real.
Well, sometimes when I look at, you know, what's this guy's name? Stephen Greer.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, look at the stuff he does and it's like, oh, come on, you know.
And again, he's a confidence man. He knows.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
He goes, and that's why people are, you know, into it, because he's telling them, look, there's this many races, and you can come out with me and pay me all this money, and I'll show you UFOs.
Yeah.
You know, with Greer, though, like, I will say that, you know, despite the fact that, you know, his personal cosmology, what he believes is really going on, is absurd.
Right.
I do really jive with the idea of, like, you
intent,
know, using ritual and intent to conjure those experiences or conjure UFOs.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, he's using a real practice, but even if nothing happens, he's still pointing apparently at every light in the sky and going, "There's a mothership there, and there's this there, and there's this there." You know.
Yeah.
Well, we can get into some of the comments that were happening while you were giving the talk. Vincent Trewell was commenting on how he had to stop walking at a certain stretch of road, which had sidewalks, traffic lights, and crosswalks, after I nearly got hit several times, despite being a chunky man wearing blaze orange. It was a freeway on-ramp, and drivers were looking for cars, not people.
Yep.
Yeah, and Vincent is somebody that drives a lot like I do. You are right about that. Most of the time as a driver, you're looking for other cars.
Yes.
So that's why it's very important, like, you know, and especially when it's like dark outside. But yeah, it is there. I never thought of it that way, but that is an interesting perception.
Yeah, and we don't realize we're doing it. We're looking, but you're not picking up what's there. And the same thing happens when you're distracted sometimes. You know, you might look both ways and then start to go, and there's something coming. You're like, whoa, how didn't I see that? Because our brain is not focused on the thing you're actually doing.
It was crazy because, yeah, I'm kind of a big guy.
Yeah.
I was wearing blaze orange, and people just literally did not see me.
Yep.
They weren't looking for people, they were looking for cars.
Yeah, well, like I said, the study said that cities that have more pedestrians have less pedestrian accidents, which seems to go against logic, but it's because those cities, the people are more used to looking for people.
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely a thick. I mean, it's a dense book, but it's definitely a book I think most people in this who are interested in this stuff should read, because there's a lot there that connects into just everything about who we are and how we perceive things.
And I was talking about in the chat about a traumatic event I had about 23 years ago that lasted for, you know, the event and the aftermath lasted for something like probably a year. And I seriously think back on that stuff, and I can't figure out what memories or actual memories and what memories is something else. You know what I mean? Like,
yes,
it seemed like, I don't know if it was a dream or if it was, I just don't know. I can't separate what I do remember when it happened. I had very clear memories, but now 23 years later, I can't separate anything. It's all like a mess in my brain.
Oh, absolutely. And especially traumatic stuff will do that. But normal memories will do that too. You know, as I'm working on my book, there are people I talk about going to hang out with, and I don't even know who those people are. I'm like, who the hell is that? All right. You know, I mean, clearly it was someone I didn't hang out with a lot, but I think when I wrote it down, I knew, well, of course I'm going to know when I read this back what that is. But, you know, 20, 30 years down the line, I have no idea.
Yeah.
One of the memories I was actually correct about, but it really bothered me, was the night the name Seriah was set into my head. and I knew the girl that was in the car next to me, who was asleep at the time. We were just past her house when that happened, and I'm looking at that memory going, that's why would we not have dropped her off? That doesn't make any sense. Why would be because she lived on the way to my house, and why did we not drop her off? And it wasn't until I got up to the part of my notes where I found out she came to my house and we left from here, and that's why we had driven right by her house. And I'm like, okay, at least I remembered it right. Like, it didn't seem to make sense, but now it makes sense. Okay.
But when
And
you,
I think
when
that
you went back to remember it, you thought logically
Right.
about the order of where she lives. So you thought the memory matched what your logical mind was thinking.
Right. The it's like the memory's got to be wrong. The logic is here. We should have dropped her off. So what the hell's going on?
And what you mentioned about a super, super great tool for this is just what you said, write it down when it happens.
Yes.
Well, you know, to pull out your phone or whatever, put it in the notes, whatever. I mean, so easy.
Yep.
These days.
Yeah. It's especially easy now with phones. I mean, you can just record a voice memo.
Exactly. You know.
I mean, you
Maybe
mentioned
maybe you'll get something else talking on it too.
you mentioned something in there about, I mean, pretty much about the Mandela effect. I think Vincent said, you know, the Mandela effect stuff. And my thought about the Mandela effect is that that's primarily a memory thing about how you should remember something.
Mhm.
I can think about in my local area, that there's a road, and this is just a very simple example of this. There's a road that everyone says is Shoots Lane, Shutes. Actually, it's Shoot Lane, Shute, but everyone says Shoots Lane.
Right.
Really?
And I was taught, yes, everyone says that. But if you actually look at the sign, Sergio knows the road I'm talking about. If you actually look at the sign, it is Shoot Lane. But nobody says that. Nobody says it that way. So that's an accent thing as well, and
Sure.
a colloquialism, but it's also a memory thing. People remember it as that, as shoots instead of shoot.
And I mean, there's definitely a few weird Mandela effect ones out there, like the James
Yeah.
Bond
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, that one is weird. And I swear to God, I can remember that. I remember that the girl had braces
Yeah, everyone
because
does.
the joke makes sense.
That's the thing.
That's the thing.
That's the thing about it.
Yeah.
It makes more sense if she has braces than not. And it's kind of like, but I mean, we could just all be putting that in later. Maybe they just didn't think about it. We're putting it in later because it makes more sense. But
Yeah.
that's the one that definitely hangs me up a little bit. I'm like, what? She didn't have braces.
Well, Chris Ernst, I mean, you know, you're the film guy here. I mean, are they changing film?
Yeah, they're not changing film. I mean, besides whatever banana stuff George Lucas is doing, or did, because Greedo didn't shoot first.
Right.
Yeah, but I mean, I remember the Bond thing the way you all remember it. I mean, I remember having braces as well, but I agree with you, Adam. I mean, I think that the Mandela effect is an interesting idea, and as a concept, this idea of shifting sort of quantum realities is an interesting idea. I think most of this stuff, though, is human memory, and I completely agree with that. Yeah.
I would say some of it could have something to it, you know, but once people get into it, they get really excited and they look at every little thing that they remember and go, I didn't remember this, I didn't remember that.
Well, yeah, I mean, personally, I think that the big stuff like, you know, Nelson Mandela or Berenstain Bears, those ones, those seem to me really like misremembering. I think that you'd be more often, if there are these things actually happening, which I completely think is possible, that it would be something else. It'd be something less either prosaic or something that's not shared necessarily on such a wide level.
Yeah. Like I've told you guys, I think about my Johnny Cash Mandela effect thing, right?
I
No.
vaguely remember.
Okay, so I have.
I've got one too. I've got one too. I want to share.
All right. I've got a very, very clear memory of my freshman year in college, going into the cafeteria and seeing Kurt Loder on MTV News say that Johnny Cash had been in a car accident. It was right after the release of that album where he did like the covers and stuff.
Yeah, sure.
That he'd been in a car wreck and that he was in critical condition in the hospital, and that he died a few days later. And for years and years and years, this is how I remembered how Johnny Cash died. It wasn't until I was telling my girlfriend about this that she was like, "What are you talking about? That's not how Johnny Cash died." And I'm like,
right.
What are you talking about? Like, this is a very strong memory in my head. Like, I've seen this on the news in the cafeteria, like at my university. And to this day, I'm like the only person who remembers it that way, but that's the memory that's in my head.
Well, that's
so.
wild. Yeah. I'm more likely to believe that you're a refugee from yeah.
I swear to God, that Robert Loggia died. I heard it on the radio.
Who's that?
Robert Loggia. Of all people.
I don't know who that is.
He's an actor. You would totally know him if you saw him.
Okay. The most famous you can think of, it was he was the guy the boss that Al Pacino kills in Scarface.
Never watched Scarface.
Frank. Okay.
He played a lot of these like gangster type roles.
He was the general. He was
I'm not familiar with
the general in Independence Day. All right. So, but I swear to God, I don't know why Robert Loggia. I have no idea. But like, I swear to God, I heard he died, and then and so I thought he was dead, and I remember looking him up, and I'm like, well, no, he's not dead. And then I remember he heard then he actually died. I swear to God that happened, just like you said, Ren. But it's like, I don't know. I mean, maybe I misheard things. The famous one was Kirk Douglas.
Yeah,
because people didn't realize that he was still alive. He's dead now, I think, but people didn't. Chris Ernst, help me out. I think he's actually dead. But
Kirk Douglas is dead now. Yeah.
Okay. Right.
Yeah. He'd be like 100 something.
Yeah. So like, but that's one of the most famous one that people said like they thought he was dead. I think that was just because he was so old.
Yeah.
That
he died. Kirk
that
Douglas died like
alive
2 years ago, I think.
Yeah.
It was really recent. Yeah.
Right.
The thing is too, I think sometimes when these older actors drop out of public eye, we just kind of assume they're dead because we know they're up there and we don't hear anything about them anymore.
Yeah.
And then it pops up that they died. And you're like, they weren't already dead? Yeah.
Is this the Robert Loggia filmography that you're sending here?
Oh, I was trying to send a picture of Robert Loggia, but it didn't. Yeah.
Well, as the film guy, Chris, we all need to know about whether Sinbad really did this movie called Shazam. And you know anything about that?
I don't. I remember Kazam.
I remember Kazam. Yeah.
I don't remember any Shazam. No,
I don't remember.
Yeah, I get those.
The funniest one is that people don't believe that. One of mine is that like a 666 cough syrup was ever that existed. There's a cough syrup in the South called. It says like 666 on the labels, 666. It's like a cough.
Wow.
It's like an old timey like cough syrup from like the 40s or something. But you can
it's
still
not
find
just
it.
in the South. It's in Wisconsin too.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I've seen it. It's a cold remedy. Yeah.
Yeah.
I always wondered why would they pick the devil's number to market cough syrup. I mean, it's crazy.
It's very strange. But like people don't believe that it ever existed because they're like, what? I don't remember ever seeing this, which I think is mostly because like it wasn't super common. You know, you didn't see it everywhere. It was like you'd see it in like sort of old timey drugstores and stuff. You know, like independently owned places. I would see it there, but like I wouldn't see it in like Walgreens.
Chris, so when I was talking about the video movie inconsistencies, you're familiar with that type of stuff, right?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's a funny thing because, you know, you teach, I'm a film professor and, you know, we all teach, you want to try to watch out for having inconsistencies and, you know, that's what a script supervisor is for. But there are tons of them and they happen all the time. And there are many movies and I, you know, can't think of any off of my head, but if you just like Google it, I think there's a whole list of them, like really famous movies where there are these big, you know, inconsistencies and there are flubs and weird stuff like that. Stuff shows up And oftentimes, if you have the best take, performance wise or camera wise, you'll take something and use something that has a slight inconsistency, just because people aren't going to notice it. But yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, isn't that where the TV Trips thing, like the whatever happened to the mouse, comes from? Yeah.
Yeah.
Continuity issues.
Continuity issues is the term for it. Exactly.
Yeah.
The what was the awful movie Batista did? The zombie movie in Vegas there.
Oh, the one that Snyder did. I don't even remember the name of it. Yeah,
it was like Land of the Dead. Wasn't that Land of the Dead?
It was something else. I actually liked that movie. I thought it was funny.
Well, but the thing is, like at the end, part of the subplot is rescuing this woman who they put on the helicopter, and then you never see her again.
Yeah.
And then the helicopter crashes, and you don't know if she lived or died because she's just gone. It's like a video game where you're like, you got her to the helicopter, and she just disappeared from reality. And I'm thinking, how many people did not notice that they never saw this woman again?
They gave up.
There's also randomly like robots in the movie. Like some of the zombies are robots, which is something I don't think most people notice. But I don't know. It's such a stupid movie. I don't know. I think it's just like, it doesn't take itself super seriously, which is the best I can ask for from like zombie related media these days.
Right. Yeah, it's just, but that's like a huge thing. And it's kind of like you just took an entire subplot and left it out. And I bet 50% of the people watching the movie didn't even notice.
Well, Vincent says, he said, my wife absolutely saw the Sinbad genie movie and she's from the same town as Sinbad.
Wow.
Yeah, that's the truth. It's a thing. Make of it
that's-
what you will.
That's one that when I remember hearing that in the whole like Mandela effect lore, it's like I'm just like, I don't remember this at all.
I remember Sinbad dressing up in a way that you might think is like a genie a lot, because it was the 90s.
But I mean, if you think about it, like, what's the equation? I mean, a comedian named Sinbad. What are you going to equate that with? A genie from the story, right?
Sure.
So in people's mind, and then you've got the fact that Shaq did do a genie movie, and it's called a very similar title from what people remember. I think it just there's so much media and so much in popular culture that, like, I'm surprised our brains are total mush, how we can even keep all this shit straight anymore.
I'm pretty sure they are partially mush.
It doesn't surprise me, honestly, that would be just, it goes in your brain, it comes out through the blender, and it comes back out.
Yeah.
I guess that's a good point. All this mass media, how is this affecting our perception of the paranormal too? I mean, it's really shaped by the stuff.
Yeah, that's why I say, I mean, your brain, as they're talking about, like, perception is partially based on past experience and interpretation. So yeah, I mean, if the media is showing you Bigfoot and ghosts and telling you these are a thing, that's what your brain's going to jump to.
Yeah, it's going to shape your perception of that.
Yeah, well, I mean, the one I keep going back to is the Black Eyed Kids stuff, because that was a huge motif in several shit TV shows, X-Files being one of them.
Yep.
And then people all of a sudden started claiming that they saw the Black Eyed Kids. And I mean, it kind of just circles around on each other, on itself. I mean, so people start seeing the Black Eyed Kids because of popular culture. And then all of a sudden somebody's going to make a Black Eyed Kid movie. And
True.
Vincent says it's Army of the Dead.
That's it.
Yeah.
I mean, I finished it.
You got through it, Seriah.
I
Congratulations.
somehow feel like I deserve something for watching the whole thing as well.
Exactly.
You deserve a prize. Does anybody have any more questions for Seriah, or any comments, or anything that they don't speak all at once?
Did you guys hear about the Mandela thing about the one with the Picard and the crystal?
No.
Somebody posted it on the Where Did the Road Go server, Discord server. Apparently Picard had some crystal that he fiddled with a lot in TNG, and like 70 or 80 times, and nobody remembers it. And some people are saying they went back to see the series and it's not there, and then some people say that it is there.
Huh.
It's, I don't know.
Weird.
Yeah, I don't remember The Next Generation enough to know one way or the other.
Yeah, I don't remember that at all.
Yeah.
I did see something.
neither.
I did see something interesting today, that the guys that do Stranger Things have apparently gone back and digitally altered some things from the past seasons.
Really
Yeah,
interesting.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that.
yeah,
And that's the thing with media the way it is now. You can do that, you know, like you can just go back, because especially the more things go to just streaming, you don't know if you're seeing the same version that you saw initially unless you have a hard copy of it.
right,
Yeah.
right. So that, I mean,
True.
that's something that just further messes with people's minds as far as like Mandela stuff.
Like, even if you're looking at a capture of something off of a security camera, they could still manipulate that.
Oh, certainly. I mean, that's what made the Elisa Lam video so weird, is that even though they released it, I mean, the police released that video, but it's sped up and the
Yeah.
time codes are removed and all this other, it's been altered. And it's like, why would you release an altered video?
I think they said that it was probably some things that were out of order in it too,
Yeah.
and that's what made it seem so odd and so creepy.
Yep.
When it really wasn't.
When it was, and especially being sped up.
Yeah, right. And people
But
didn't
why would-
people didn't really notice that at first.
No, but why would you do that? That's the thing. I mean, like, this doesn't even, there's no sensible, like, what is to be gained by releasing a video that makes this girl look creepy?
Right. Did you guys see the Netflix documentary on that? They claim to have like solved it.
No.
There's the Netflix.
Yeah, I saw it.
The idea seems to be that they solved it.
And what did they think happened?
It's been over a year since I saw it. I don't remember, my memories being mushy.
I think it was that she was taking some kind of
Yes.
psychotropic, or she was one of the medicine that she was on, and
it wasn't the right medicine, or she was not taking it, or something.
Yeah. And so that they think that she probably started getting kind of paranoid.
Yeah.
And she went up to
Yeah,
the top
right.
floor. She saw the water tower, the water cistern or whatever, and just decided to go for a swim, and got trapped.
Yeah.
You know, the thing fell down on her.
Right.
And I think that's what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember now. You're correct. Yeah.
And then you have the correlation thing where you had that test in the same area that was called the Lam Elisa test.
Oh yeah, that's some trickster shit right there.
Yeah, exactly. But people
What
immediately,
the hell are the odds on that? I mean, that's like
that's it.
impossible, you know?
But
Yeah,
it's,
that was incredibly weird.
you connect that to a bigger conspiracy, but it's like there's nothing to connect it other than the fact that there's a
Nope.
similarity in the names.
No connections whatsoever.
Yeah. It's like, oh, it's weird. It's like, yeah, that is weird. It's probably weirder than, the actual story of what happened to her, that there happened to be a test in the area that had her name on it. I mean, that's bizarre.
Well, I mean, I definitely think there is, we do live in there is some kind of weird coincidental nexus like that.
Yeah,
there's, but it's whether you think that it's meant to happen or whether you think that it is just a weird coincidence. That's the two schools of thought, because I think people get bent out of shape, trying to figure out that it's something that was like, meant to happen by some shadowy organization.
Right,
I mean, that's
right. Exactly.
when the actual truth could be infinitely more fascinating.
Yes.
So
The
or both.
yeah, we're both. I mean, it's that second order cybernetics thing. The feedback.
If there is some kind of, synchronistic matrix, then it makes sense that magic would be, able to manipulate that.
Yeah. And again, it also comes down to how we perceive reality. I mean, when you're paying more attention to synchronicities, you're going to find more synchronicities, and you're probably going to create some of your own, both by morphing reality itself and also connecting things that otherwise you wouldn't have connected.
Exploring
that's what I
morphic
was-
reality.
I think last Strange Realities, I was making jokes with Nathan Isaacs about that the whole pennyroyal thing is basically them creating everything, not as like a hoax, but just literally they're like they're magicking all this stuff,
Right.
all these coincidences into existence.
Yeah, right.
And it's entirely possible.
There's this weird physics theory that part of the simulation hypothesis that says that reality is information on a 2D surface that's some arbitrary distance away that's being projected onto 3 dimensions.
Like a hologram.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. But I mean, I don't understand the whole extent of it, but it's not exactly like a hologram. But it's like, I thought the concept was very interesting because, something that's on a 2D surface somewhere, who knows where, and then you project that, then, how maybe somebody can manipulate that information as it's getting projected or something. I don't know.
Possible, yeah. And we don't know what any of it is, so we don't know where the limitations are.
Right.
I want to hear from Stephanie quick. She's been quiet this whole entire time. I know she's got to have some things to ask or to talk about. Stephanie. I guess she stepped away.
I'll put her on the spot.
Yeah, I'll put her on the spot. Oh, okay. She says she's with her mom right now. So, but if she's got any questions, she can type it to me. So, anybody have any other questions or anything they want to ask Seriah? All right, Chris Ernst.
I have questions and you want to ask him? I've been asking him too many questions already.
Well, actually, I wanted to ask you about the film.
Yeah.
We can talk a little bit about that.
Well, sure. Well, Seriah and I, are working together. I've been coming up and shooting stuff with him, and we're basically just making a film that it's kind of like where did the road go profile, and then by extension, I mean, it's Seriah, so he's talking about his personal experiences. So we went up to a couple different places where he had some experiences that he talked about, and I've interviewed him and started putting it together. Yeah, it's about like I have sent, there was an assembly that I sent to, there's a person who's always like the first person I bounce things off of, and I sent it to them to take a look at it. And I'll be sending something to Seriah in a couple, before I come up in a couple of weeks. So yeah, it's one of those things that I think anybody who's interested or is approaching the paranormal or Fortean phenomena from the sort of the same direction that Where Did the Road Go does, and Conspirinormal, Radio Mysterioso, and many others, or several others, I think will be interested in it because it kind of takes I don't want to say an exploratory approach, but it's there are probably going to be some things that are talked about that people have heard about before. It's not like these are secrets that are being revealed, but what ends up, like the shape of how it's taking, I think it sort of encapsulates a lot of what the Where Did the Road Go represents as as a show, and what it's the mark that it's kind of made on paranormal talk, podcasting, radio, so on and so forth. So yeah, I'm excited. I mean, I should have a cut to premiere, as much as we have time for it, the next Strange Realities.
Perfect. That's what we want to do. And
Yeah.
Next time he comes up, we're going to try and capture weird stuff on film.
Yeah, we are.
and
It'll be
that's
fun.
that's
Awesome.
happening this coming weekend, I think, right? You said so.
I think the 9th or 10th. Yeah, I'm going up in a couple.
Stephanie is
Yeah.
back. She says, Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing it. And I think we want to try to do some little Q&A
Absolutely.
thing. I mean, Seriah may be doing remotely, but we can make that work.
Yeah,
So
totally.
Well, if you
And-
teach me that teleport trick you were doing earlier, Adam.
I don't know. That's an ancient that's an ascended master secret, Seriah. I can't you'll have to learn that from you'll have to get with Greenfield and learn that from him. So
All right, guys. Well, we really we thank you all for attending and hope you come next month where we're going to have Joshua Cutchin, who's going to be.
Uh-oh.
I've heard of him.
that's going to be on the 22nd, which is a Friday. And that's going to be at 8 p.m. Eastern, just as this one is. And I think he said he's going to do some things from the new book. If you guys can see what we've shared here, this is the guys. This is the poster, Chris. I don't think you've seen this yet, or you may have.
Yeah, no,
yesterday.
I saw it in the Facebook link you did. Yeah,
Awesome.
it looks great.
So this is all the speakers that we have, and then off to the side, you guys can see the workshops that we're going to be doing in the next room, and hopefully everybody can come out. We're gonna of course the speakers are going to be visible as well for the online people, and then but we're going to try to do the workshops. Ren and I were talking about this the other day, do the workshops over Zoom too, so because that's in a whole entirely separate room of the of SIR Nashville. So as you guys can see, we got a great lineup this year, and a few return guests too. You can see Mr. Ernst there, and Seriah is there, and a few other people that you guys may recognize.
Awesome.
And also they're also not on the this graphic, but I've talked Surfiel into speaking too, so he's going to be giving a presentation.
July 22nd.
July 22nd for Joshua Cutchin. This is the October conference. So October 14th through 16th. So $70 to come to $70 to get in to come to Nashville, but then we are going to be doing this $30 online as well. So
Okay, cool.
3 days jammed packed.
Yep. So I just wanted to share that with everybody before we get off here. But I'm gonna stop the recording, but I want to thank everybody. Surveil, is there anything that you wanted to add, or?
No, just thanks, and I hope to see you guys. For anyone who is new to these, we hope to see you next month. We're going to try to keep everyone in the loop and be promoting the next one as well coming up. And thank you to Seriah for doing this.
Yeah, thank you, Seriah.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for doing it. All right, we're going to stop the recording, but if you guys want to hang out, we're going to hang out for just a little bit longer. So everybody at home, you don't get the joy of hanging out with us, but this will be up on video pretty soon. So thanks a lot, guys.